Hey everyone, thanks for joining. Let's just give it a couple of minutes to see if more people join, and we'll kick off the webinar. Thank you. Yeah, just one more minute, and we can get things going.
Hi everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Discover Test Case Designer. I'm Francisco Viana, Product Marketing Manager, and with me today I have Helder Ferreira, Director of Product Management, and Ivan Filipov, Solutions Architect. We're very happy that you're joining us to discover more about Test Case Designer. So let's jump right into our agenda and what you can expect today. First, to set the stage, I'll give you a quick summary of Xray Enterprise. Ivan will get the ball rolling with Xray Test Case Designer, diving into the evolution of data-driven testing and the benefits of using Test Case Designer when compared with other more common testing practices. Then he will focus on the Test Case Designer flow and show you a quick demo of it going through all of its functionalities. After the demo, Elder will give you a rundown of what we're planning in terms of the future regarding Xray Enterprise. At the end, we'll have time for a 15-minute Q&A, so feel free to submit your questions in the right side panel during the presentation, and we will do our best to address them at the end. So let's get started. Xray Enterprise allows your team to create and manage multiple versions of the same tests, find new ways to optimize test cases to cover 100% of your application's critical interactions in as few tests as possible. It allows you to trigger automations directly from Xray, and also you'll be able to automate the definition of test plans using standard Jira filters with JQL. Xray already performs greatly at scale, and now we're raising our API performance levels with up to 200 calls per minute and increasing Xray cloud storage capacity above 50 gigabytes. Finally, and acknowledging that Xray is a mission-critical app in the development lifecycle, with Enterprise, our customers will have 24/7 faster SLAs and a dedicated support queue. Xray Enterprise, test less, cover more, release faster. Now, Ivan, please take it away.
Thanks, Francisco. To understand the role and benefits of Test Case Designer, or TCD, we will briefly discuss the evolution of data-driven testing across these three stages. First, the suboptimal way of doing data-driven testing is manually creating each iteration as a separate test case. From the quality standpoint, this approach often results in tests that represent a very fragmented view of the system and struggle with redundancies or omissions, which significantly increases the defect risk in production. From the speed standpoint, manual creation just cannot keep up with the modern market demands anymore. So, the data-driven testing took the next evolution step with features like Xray's parameterized tests. With these 5 simple steps, you avoid the proliferation of test issues, improve speed and reusability, while keeping the execution and reporting clarity with the results at the iteration level. This feature is extremely useful and it has been working very well for Xray users, but that doesn't mean we cannot improve it even further. In a simple example here, we have parameters browser with 4 values and payment option with 5. If we mark them as combinatorial to generate iterations automatically, we get 20. If we add a new parameter with just 3 values, we will get 60 iterations, which is an all-or-nothing kind of approach. Furthermore, what if not all combinations are valid? That's where Test Case Designer comes in. It is a cloud, model-based test design optimization tool that takes the effectiveness of your testing to the next level. The goal is to enhance both the speed and the quality of test creation, allowing you to find more defects more efficiently. Key reasons why Test Case Designer is the next evolution step. First, advanced rule handling helps you make sure the tests are always valid based on your scope and business logic. Second, Test Case Designer uses an intelligent augmentation algorithm with flexible options, including risk-based, so that you can quickly adjust the number of scenarios based on the desired level of thoroughness. And last but not least, insightful visualizations enable you to better communicate ideas and make informed decisions about how much testing is enough. These differentiators and the overall approach result in the quantifiable benefits you can see on this slide, delivered across numerous client projects. Teams are creating more thorough tests faster, finding defects earlier in the process, and doing so in fewer tests to run and maintain over time, leading to cost savings. To sum up, TCD solves such challenges of manual test creation as prolonged and error-prone scenario selection, wasteful redundancy, gaps in test data coverage, and excessive maintenance. The Test Case Designer workflow is to identify the system elements that affect the business outcomes you're testing, create the model with parameters and rules, generate all appropriate scenarios, analyze the interaction coverage, and write the data-driven script to guide the execution. The process is iterative. It works well across industries and use cases, with the primary focus on functional, integration, and user acceptance testing. Before we jump into the demo, we will discuss a few key features for each of the 3 stages. A test model is designed around a specific scope. For example, get an insurance quote. As you think through the key actions within that scope, the critical factors or steps become TCD model parameters, while their options become parameter values. The ability to update model components in bulk accelerates the process. The rules feature, after a recent update, supports dependencies across any number of parameters, which allows you to handle more complex system logic. Model-based testing unlocks easier maintenance and reusability because changes at the model level are automatically propagated to scenarios, analysis, and scripts. Sharing the models, together with the auto-generated mind maps and the version history, improve collaboration and the learning curve. For the second stage, as already mentioned, TCD maximizes the interaction coverage in fewer scenarios. The speed and flexibility of such algorithmic generation are very impactful. Detailed interaction coverage reports and features like freeze streamline impact analysis, approvals, and execution planning. Automation-focused teams that already have scripts built out in their frameworks can leverage data table expert options at this step without going further. At the last stage, TCD provides data-driven benefits for all three of these scripting types. You can create and maintain just a handful of templates that will generate all the associated scenarios upon export. From the automation standpoint, writing data-driven BDD or robot scripts inside the tool helps less technical users contribute more. Additionally, the Automated Test Framework Expert option converts BDD scripts built inside Test Case Designer into skeletal code in various languages. Now that we have reviewed the core aspects of Test Case Designer, let's jump into the demo and see the tool in action. We will focus on more advanced areas, so if you would like a more detailed showcase of the basics, please check our previous webinars and overviews on YouTube. We are now inside Test Case Designer. As mentioned, a model is built for a well-defined scope. In our example, positive cases of generating car insurance quotes from a hypothetical web application. We can see critical factors of the flow like state, applicant age, vehicle details included as parameters, and their options as values. Users have a lot of flexibility when it comes to the structure on the screen, applying critical thinking to the parameter selection, value grouping, etc. To showcase the algorithm power, we will keep 10 values in the state parameter, even though it is a good candidate for equivalence classes. One feature to highlight at this step is value expansions. Test Case Designer supports an extra level of variation that you can see under this schema icon. It typically serves two purposes. First, you can add more specificity to the category you have selected as the value. In this example, we care about the type of car. We do not care enough about specific models, and we do not want a long list to impact our scenario count. That's why we leverage a value expansion for that list. The second purpose is to support both business clarity and automation readiness. In some applications, it is more effective to have an automated script interact with the property different from the UI label, perhaps something like an ID or index. Including such technical details as values directly may complicate the reviews across stakeholder groups. Therefore, you can keep the value name intuitive while still facilitating the automation progress, because the expert options we will talk about generate only the expansion text. It is important to remember that the presence of value expansions in the scenario set is not guaranteed, as reiterated in this tooltip and the one before export. You can easily see all layers of the parameters screen by the auto-generated mind map under Review. To improve collaboration, you can extract this artifact and attach it to the requirements in Jira to get feedback about your modeling choices earlier in the process. That also supports the improved defect prevention we talked about. And as a side note, all major screens in TCD have direct links, so you can tie the model component to a Jira story via the web link option. Moving to the next step, we use rules to make sure our test cases are always valid within the scope we define for the model. The goal of the forced interaction section is inclusion. When you either want certain combinations to appear as early as possible, or have a few exceptions that the algorithm setting would not cover automatically. The goal of the constraints section, which is our focus today, is exclusion. Regardless of the implementation type, it is important to keep in mind that with constraints, you are removing unwanted interactions from the suite. You can implement constraints in this click-based view. However, all the latest, more advanced functionality is only available in this text-based one. So we strongly recommend getting to know it. The foundation of this feature is the first 3 rule types you can see in this dialog. The first one says that values cannot be together in the same test. The second and the third say that values should only be together in the same test and specify whether it's a one or bidirectional dependency. In this webinar, we wanted to highlight more complex rules enabled by relatively recent product releases. First, the skip constraint, which is the 4th rule type in the dialog, allows you to easily handle conditional blocks of parameters in one line. In our example, we do not want the student driver discount details to appear when the discount itself is not applied. So, we provide a syntax that skips the range of parameters from SD gender to SD car, including both ends. Whenever not applied, value appears in the scenario. We will see what this translates to on the scenario screen later on. The second highlight is the ability to create rules across any number of parameters, potentially with multiple values per parameter in the same line. This requires new functions you can see here. All, which is similar to AND in logic statements, as well as SUM, which is similar to OR. In our example, we want to make sure that the risk score is assigned correctly based on the latest hypothetical rule engines behind our application. Specifically, the first statement says that the only way to get the low score is to be in the higher age brackets and to have a clean driving record and to have an excellent credit score. All 3 conditions should be true at the same time in the test case for the algorithm to select less than 70 value for the risk score parameter. The next rule applies similar logic for the highest score. Note that there is no rule for the middle value of the risk score parameter. That is because the algorithm is smart enough to imply some of the rules based on what you specify. So you can save time and not explicitly write out all the constraints yourself. To validate that our rules work as expected, we navigate to the scenario screen and do a quick spot check. For example, here are the conditional skips for the student driver section, this empty space right here, and we can also see the state dependency for the discount applicability, which was the last rule on the constraint screen with the sum function. Whenever Alaska is one of the states, the student driver discount cannot be applied. Parameter structure and rules are two of the ways to add business intelligence and critical thinking to the science of the TCD algorithm. Another one is the risk-based setting on the scenario screen called mixed strength. But before we evaluate it, let's walk through a couple of possible decisions. We just saw that the initial generation was fast for the two-way setting, which is a popular combinatorial choice also called pairwise. It resulted in, let's say, around 70 tests. This setting tells the algorithm to analyze each eligible pair of values across all parameters, then arrange those pairs in as few rows as possible. Going back to the example from the deck, what if we wanted all combinations of 3 parameters because we really want to prioritize thoroughness? The corresponding option in TCD is 3-way. So let's try it. With the recent update, the table is being streamed, so you can start the review right away instead of waiting for the whole computation to finish, which further accelerates the feedback loop for larger models. We now have around 475 tests. The generation still finished in seconds, so TCD can handle rather large volumes. But this is quite a big jump for what seemed like a reasonable goal. Let's imagine this is too much for our execution deadlines. The way to make this test suite manageable without losing critical quality is that risk-based option mentioned a little bit ago. Often, not all parameters in a model are equally important from the interaction standpoint. This algorithm setting allows you to pick the areas where you want to focus your coverage. In our example, since we didn't group the state values, let's assume we don't need a high level of interaction for that parameter, so we choose 1-way. Also, expected results, like risk score, commonly stay at 2 or 1-way. Let's pick 2-way for this example. And once we click Reapply and launch this computation with updated settings, we will see that the number dropped significantly by about 200 just by us changing 2 drop-down values. You can see how a few relatively small adjustments can have significant impact on optimizing execution efficiency. This is why the number of tests is a tricky metric in model-based approaches. It fluctuates a lot based on the choices a designer makes for the same set of requirements. If you feel your test suites are always gigantic with combinatorial algorithms, see if there are any model levers you can pull to adjust that. And we have tutorials summarizing these principles and tips. To sum up, with multiple options between pairwise, and all possible combinations, TCD provides flexibility in achieving the balance between speed and quality that suits your goals. During the initial design, once the parameters and rules are in place, the generation of scenarios is extremely fast thanks to the algorithm power, as you saw. But this benefit is even larger when we talk about maintenance and model updates, because changes to parameters or rules will be quickly incorporated into the test suite. Before we talk about the model outputs, let's briefly discuss the analysis visualizations. In addition to providing more clarity about the pairwise or aggregate interaction level, they highlight the statistical prioritization of incremental interaction coverage that the algorithm performs. It is more apparent from the coverage graph. The shape of the curve clearly reflects the front-loaded maximum variation upfront approach that helps with the defect prevention. Now let's talk about how to get this optimized suite into the execution tools. For manual, you would utilize the corresponding option in scripts and the Xray sync we will see shortly. For this webinar, we will focus on the automated side. Some teams, as mentioned, may just need the data table, which they can download from the scenario screen. And then they can use the table as the data source in existing scripts outside Test Case Designer. This is also an option if you are already using parameterized cucumber tests in Xray. Others would like to generate the scripts inside our tool as well. They would utilize this Automate section, which supports Gherkin and robot editors. Prioritizing Gherkin for this demo, we can create both scenario and outline formats and switch between the two easily by just changing the name. Let's say we want to take the outline path. The syntax on this tab is up to you when it comes to the step verbiage. The only requirement is utilizing these parameter names to connect the script with the data table. If you are doing it right, you will see the examples table properly populated in the preview section on the right. One somewhat hidden aspect of this scripting is the ability to handle conditional steps and allocate scenarios accordingly. If you remember, we had the skip constraint for the student driver discount section. Therefore, we would like to have two outlines instead of worrying about several conditional steps. We achieve that by using the filter for that trigger value with the curly brackets. You can put it in the steps or the outline name, it works the same way. We can then put the second outline on the same tab, but for this demo, we will separate it. The benefit of doing so is that you can export or sync tabs separately. So if the discount section, let's say, is not ready yet for testing, or you are still working on the automation behind it, you can still easily get started on the tests without the discount. Proceeding to the export, we can do two things. One, send the outline to Xray via API using this option. You can also create a test plan or test set right away, or choose an existing one. This is how the result looks like inside Xray. Very similar to any other Cucumber test, but with the optimized, more thorough examples table created faster. You can identify TCD outputs by auto-generated labels. Second, we can create files for our automation team to accelerate the progress. Depending on the framework, you can export just the feature file or take it a step further. Select the combination of options and generate the skeletal code for it. Then the automation specialists can define how exactly the steps interact with the application. To show a couple of examples, this is what part of the output would look like for Selenium plus Robot and Java plus Cucumber. This concludes the demo portion of the webinar. Now I'm going to pass to Helder for the roadmap topic.
And hey everyone, so as always, let's talk about a bit what is coming ahead for Xray Enterprise. So, and I split this into 3 tiers. So it's what we are actually working on, and we will deploy this and making available soon, what we will work next and then later, okay? And let's start with the first one that we are actually working on, which is feature toggle. So we understand that every time that we do a launch, and specifically for cloud, this might impact your users, right? Because again, every time we do a new feature launch, it will change the process that you have within your company. So what we are adding now is this feature toggle for enterprise, meaning that every time we launch a new feature, you will have the option to disable the feature while you assess first if the feature does comply with your own company rules and if it will actually be beneficial for your users. So we will give you full visibility and control over these new features that we are deploying. Also, and actually something that we are working currently, it's Test Case Designer, but on-premise. So we understand that specifically for customers that have a lot of security concerns and rules, they do want to keep using data center and have this on-premise. So we will make available Test Case Designer as a full deploy with you within your instance. So you can remove access for external access and be able to have Test Case Designer working as the data center. Also, I'm talking about performance. We also understand that performance is one of the main complaints and improvements that we are focusing in. And for this, sometimes the performance is being impacted not specifically by the app itself, of course, that we still need and we will invest and improve on the performance, but also on the way that the system is being used. So for that, we will have this checkup tool for enterprise. It will be a set of steps that the system will run within your instance and will tell you the health of your instance. Is there something that you should be doing, like archiving the older test runs? Is actually the database set up in a proper way? What can we improve even in terms of system? So this tool will give everyone a quick health check about your system and what you can do to improve the system outside of the performance improvements that we'll deploy. Okay. Moving to the next section, one of the main pain points that we see our customers having is managing all these tests and test sets and test runs that are being created, right? Of course, that we have the test repository, but we want to have a way where the users can, at the moment they are creating, for example, a test, they can automatically, or while they are creating, they can assign like a flag, a label, a component. And this will immediately tag that feature or that test, sorry, and place it within that specific folder. So within the test repository, you will have the current set of folder structure, but you can also add pre-filtered folders, meaning that, for example, if you label a test as new, when you are creating the test on Xray, it will automatically be added to a folder where you define that all the tests labeled as new should end up. So this will massively improve the way that you are managing all of your tests. Also, we want to have more options to be able to export data from Xray. And this is why we have here the test coverage information for your test runs or your test executions to be exported through API. We will give you options through API to export this data that then you can push into other tools to do proper analytics or even better or improved reporting with your own systems that you have. Of course, that we already mentioned this, but we are also focusing on the safe focus reports. So reports that will tackle when something happens within your own process. The main goal with these reports is to be able to act upon some issues that happen during the test process. If you detect an issue, these focus reports will focus on making sure that you pinpoint what was the reason and create actions to mitigate this from happening in the future. Later down the year, we will also add a new feature, which is risk analysis and management. So from all your tests or a test plan that you might have within your plan, we want to analyze and give the user the number regarding risks. So we will do a calculation of risk. So for example, areas of that plan that are not being considered, and we will calculate a risk level. And of course, that then you will be able to tackle and take more data-fed decisions according to this risk analysis. What we are also trying to improve is the way that within the test repository, you have the custom fields are available and visible on the same test repository. This will remove the need to jump back and forward from the test repository to the actual tests and trying to understand what is the component of this test. You will be able to see all this data, all this information, and even, because it's custom fields, your own created fields directly on the test repository. And of course, that also we now have on Xray Enterprise remote jobs triggering. But of course, that you trigger the remote job and you just wait, right? The only option that you have to understand is this being executed, what is the ETA, it's to go into the CI/CD platform and try to check what is the status there. With the remote job status, every time you trigger a job, you will also be able to track it and see that its status from within Xray, keeping up with the initial promise of not having to leave Xray until this remote job is complete and the results are pushed back to Xray. So in a nutshell, these are the main goals that we have for Xray Enterprise for the current year. We have further projects in queue. Right now, we won't be able to address them and go into a lot of detail, but please keep an eye out for our public roadmap. Very, very soon, we will make this available to everyone so that you can see not only what it's inbound for Xray Enterprise, but also be able to comment and to provide some feedback to us. Okay. With this said, Francisco, back to you.
Thank you, Elder. A lot of exciting new stuff coming in for Xray Enterprise this year. So everyone, as Elder said, keep your eyes open. More things will come. So now just to get you a bit of additional information, how do you get started with the test case designer? So at the moment, as both Elder and Ivan said, test case designer is a cloud-based only feature of Xray Enterprise, but it is available for both Jira Data Center and Jira Cloud. And to have access to the test case designer, you must have an Xray Enterprise license. And for that, you'll have to have an Xray Test Management license, version 6.3.0 or higher for data center. So you'll need to have both Xray Test Management and Xray Enterprise on top of that, so both products. So when a valid Xray Enterprise license is detected inside your Jira, a new configuration option will be made available, and then you can set up your test case designer instance. Just to sum up some of the things that were said here today, Xray Test Case Designer is a powerful test design optimization tool for more complex workflows and systems. It enhances two main features of Xray parameterized tests, which are rule handling that ensures that tests are always valid based on your scope and business logic, and combinatorial flexibility. By using intelligent augmentation algorithm, will help you adjust the number of scenarios based on the desired level of thoroughness. It also brings a lot of benefits to your day-to-day, such as time savings when creating and documenting tests, helping you accelerate your time to market and delivering software faster, improve your coverage efficiency by reducing data coverage gaps in fewer tests. So this is very important for the execution times. And it also increases the variation upfront, reducing costs by finding defects earlier on the development process. So bringing your testing practice, shifting your testing practice left. And now we're ready to answer some of your questions. We noticed that some questions are already coming in. And the first question that we have here is, why is combinatorial testing important? So Elder or Ivan, you can take this one.
Sure, good question. Primarily, the impact is based on the research results about the causes of defects in production. And specifically, those results indicate that the vast majority, about 84% on average across several industries, happen due to a problem with either one parameter, also called single value fault, or a combination of values from two parameters, also known as two-way interaction fault. So not considering combinatorics leaves you exposed to a lot of that risk if you're only focused on just single parameter values kind of in isolation. And just as a reference, some of the studies that mention this topic are estimating T-way fault profile evolution during testing and practical combinatorial testing, which are both presented by National Institute of Standards and Technology.
Cool. Thank you for the answer. Another question here is, what are the most common mixed strength settings?
That's a little bit tricky to answer in a generalized way, but kind of tied, I guess, to the first question. We rarely see the selections in Test Case Designer go above 4-way because, as we mentioned, those 84% kind of tackle ones and twos, and then once you start exploring 3-way and 4-way, you get close to about 96% of the defect profiles. So typically, for more critical projects in early stages, we see the combinations of 2s and 3s. Once those projects start moving towards more regression testing, we start seeing the combinations of 1 and 2s with fewer 3s. But again, make sure that the mixed strength settings are based on your specific risk profile versus some generalized advice.
Great, thank you. A lot of good questions here. Another question that we're seeing is, are there any limits to the test case designer model capacity?
The answer is fluctuating as we develop the product more and more. The recent numbers are that a single model can handle up to 256 parameters. But again, just keep in mind that this is with the focus on the elements that are interesting from the combinatorial perspective. So if you start putting more test data, like single value parameters and things like that, then the actually interesting factors, there is potential to reconsider the approach. And then there is no direct limit on the number of values or the number of value expansions for that matter. However, each model will generate up to around 5,000 test cases. So if you start hitting higher numbers than that on a consistent basis, that may be a sign that, again, either some of the parameter structure is not exactly optimal, or potentially you're trying to fit a lot of things into the scope of a single model, and you could benefit from splitting that into separate models, potentially within the same project, not just because of that limitation, but also because it may simplify your maintenance, your rule creation, and your reviews.
Okay, that's a lot of iterations that you can get with a test case designer. Another question, we only have a few more questions here, is about the analysis visualizations that you showed. People are asking if is it possible to share these visualizations?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. Just keep in mind that those are fairly dynamic based on the model context. So the best way, I would say, is to give the stakeholders direct access to the model and then just provide the link specifically for the visualization that you want, whether it's the matrix or the graph, a link to the Jira story so that they can quickly navigate with just one press. However, if you are interested in just a more static export, then you can either grab a screenshot, or for the matrix specifically, we do provide the export options in JSON and XML formats. So you might need to have some kind of a parser afterwards that would process that information.
Okay, thank you. And final two questions that we have here, and keep in mind that we still have some time. So if you have any additional questions, be sure to write them here on the dialog box. But the next question is, how does freeze help with the impact analysis?
Oh yeah, that's an interesting feature. And just as a quick summary, what it does is it saves your entire scenario table as forced interactions. So it kind of copies the content from the scenarios tab to the forced interactions tab. And then if a model change comes, specifically the more interesting aspect of the impact analysis is when we add values or lose values, right? Because the new parameter would just be at the end of the table. So when you are trying to do the edit on the parameter screen, you would get a warning saying that adding that value or removing that value would impact a certain number of frozen interactions, which is the same as it would impact a certain number of the tests that you had in the previous release. And then let's say you accept the warning and you move forward. On the scenario screen, the visual highlight of the values that got removed or the values that got added would be different from the frozen elements. So you would quickly see where exactly the changes happen, and then you can make a decision whether you want to stay with that particular suite or you want to pursue further optimization. You're maybe less worried about preserving the status of the previous release, and you just want the lowest possible number of the optimized test, in which case you can unfreeze again with a single button and then just generate this from scratch relatively quickly.
Great, thank you so much for your explanation. And one final question. Is the exports / sync dialog customizable?
To an extent, yes, depending on which elements exactly would you like to see, maybe more of a question for a demo or a kind of one-on-one Q&A session. But in short, you can add some of the common metadata fields to that dialog. So if you want to have a different component value or different reported assignees, some of the common Jira fields, those can be added to both the sync dialog and some of the export dialogs, depending on which target you have. So for example, the feature file or the automated test framework option, since they're not as geared towards test management, those wouldn't have the same dialog, but options like Xray export or synchronizations, yes, we can customize those.
Great. It seems that we don't have any other questions. I'll just give it a few more seconds to see if anyone wants to ask one more question. Otherwise, we want to thank all of you for joining us here today. We've reached the end of the webinar. Just be sure to look out for an email from Xray, because we will be sending the recording of the webinar to all of you, so you can watch it later, to pass it on to your teams, to some people that may be interested and couldn't attend. So thank you guys so much for being here today, and thank you for joining.